Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ken Calvert along with Father Joe Grimaldi, and I don't care what they may say. I'm getting down on my knees and pray. Sound off.
1, 2, 3.
I was trying to sound military for you there.
You did a good job.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ken Calvert along with Father Joe Grimaldi. The Father Joe podcast is proudly supported by Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln, 12 Mile and Telegraph in Southfield. The spring savings sales event is going on now at Star Lincoln, and that means additional savings on every Lincoln in stock. If you're in the greater Detroit area and you're looking for a new Lincoln, then Star Lincoln is the only answer. Whether you crave a new Lincoln MKC, Lincoln MKX, the classic Lincoln Navigator, or the awesome Lincoln Nautilus, give them a call, drop on by, and you'll see why they've been in business for decades. In a hurry, shop online, starlincoln.com. Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln, 12 Mile and Telegraph in Southfield, home of the Star treatment. A day is lost if you don't learn something. Every day. I think it's important to learn something every day. Now, obviously, I knew that there were chaplains in our military branches in the service, correct?
Correct.
They usually go in as a private or an ensign or...
Depending on the branch.
Depending upon the branch. I did not know that they have their own archdiocese.
Correct.
And they have their own archbishop.
Correct.
And his name is?
His name is Archbishop Broglio, Broglio.
So he's in charge of all the service people.
Correct.
That are chaplains.
Correct.
You were a chaplain?
I was not formally one, but I would be a contract chaplain, which meant I was not ordained for the military vicariate, as they call it. I was ordained for the Diocese of Honolulu, so I would help out because in Hawaii, we have lots of bases.
Yes, you do.
And so we had the Marine Corps base, you had the Naval base, the Air Force base, and so on. And usually they would need some help, and they would need contract workers, they call them. And so if on a given Sunday they needed somebody and I was free, I would go and help.
It's interesting because that's an important part. That's an important facet of our military. A lot of people, a lot of recruits, a lot of service people, be they lifers or otherwise, naturally have some sort of a religious background that they want to stay current with. So obviously you have Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, Hindu, and Muslim service people.
And others.
And you need representatives of those various churches or temples or mosques to service the soldier.
Correct.
It would be an interesting thing to kind of combine two vocations. One, a vocation in the military service, and the other being a Catholic priest.
Yes.
I have a cousin who has been in the military as a chaplain for quite some time, a Jesuit, and he loves it. How did you like saying Mass for the troops?
Well, let me say this. It's not necessarily for the troops. It's for their families.
Of course.
Because they're on the base, and then they are for the troops when they're deployed to different places. So, for example, I remember that the number of Catholics in the military, in my mind, was enormous. It seemed so many more were Catholics than others. The chapel at Pearl Harbor is one of the biggest chapels I've seen among the military. The Marine Corps base is a beautiful chapel as well. Now, these chapels are not just for the Catholics because they have arrangements that can easily be made to accommodate the Jewish, to accommodate the Protestants. But because there were so many Catholics, it was a very large chapel, and many of the people that went, of course, were Catholic.
There have been so many conflicts and wars that we've been drawn into, that being the United States of America. It's not unusual, of course, to occasionally hear of a chaplain who's been killed in action. Of course, a representative of the church does not carry a weapon, but he's there to serve, often on the front lines. You're taking on a lot when you not only elect to serve your country in that way, but also to basically request to be on the front lines or to be where the action is. Did you know any of those chaplains when you were in Hawaii?
Well, to answer your question, there's a man who's now being prepared for canonization in the Catholic Church. There's more than one, by the way, but there's one that's become very popular because the Knights of Columbus are promoting him. The young man's name was Vincent Capodanno.
Vincent Capodanno.
Yes. In any case, he's someone who chose to work in the military as a priest. Well, because he was a very talented individual and he was somebody who was affable. The people liked him. And so they wanted to place him, the bishops wanted to place him as pastors of churches, even in Vietnam and so on and so forth. Well, he did not want to be a pastor. He wanted to be right on that front line. And he died actually helping the soldiers die peacefully.
Yeah.
He would go from one to the other, and then eventually he himself was killed. But he chose that life because they wanted to give him a much nicer job, if you want, as somebody who was a pastor with a school and all of this. But no, he chose the other. He wanted to be there with his brothers who were dying for their country.
It's an amazing thing when you think about it. It's a double vocation. You were talking about the chapel and the families. A lot of these people, they must come to Mass before they're deployed. Do you have any stories about saying a Mass before the families are separated and they get on board a vessel and take off? It's got to be almost a sad Mass to say.
And that happens all the time.
Sure.
It's not just once in a while. The thing that I can't get out of my mind was a young man of only 20, 21, whatever. And he did not want to be in the service anymore. And he had to continue because he was signed up. He was going through, you know what I was afraid of? I was afraid of the possibility of suicide. And I had to speak with him a few times on that. And it was kind of interesting because he came to me during my, in quotes, free time, not while I was saying Mass or confessions. But so very often the chaplain is there to help individuals who are having difficulty being in the midst of the military regime and all of this other stuff. And so it depends. It's a big parish in many ways. Now,
How did you help him? What did you say to him? Did you say, listen, Frank, you've signed up for this, and or did you say, Frank, listen, if this is not for you, I'll do my best to help you possibly move away from the military? Well, that had to be a tough situation to be in.
It is, but by the same token, and you know as well as I, you go through this yourself in so many ways, when you're counseling somebody, the important thing is listening. It's not what you can tell them because they know what they have to do. But it's a matter of listening to what they're going through.
So it was more important for this young man to just be able to talk and let you listen.
Yeah, because they know that there are certain things that can be done. They know that there are options, and some are good, some are bad, but they don't want to hear that. Basically, they need to express their sorrow, what they're going through, their hurt. They don't want somebody preaching to them, about what you should do and what you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
You committed yourself, and therefore
look, young man, you've committed.
No, it's a matter of listening to why and what. And also along the way, you're encouraging them to do good.
Sure.
And like if they come up with something that they find as a good option, well, you encourage them in those things. So everybody is so different that it's hard to say there's only one way of doing it, because depending on the individual's problem, depending on the individual's disposition, personality, or hers for that matter. It's a matter of responding to their particular need.
Yeah, I can't help but stop thinking about Father Vincent Capellano.
No, it's Capodanno.
Capodanno, okay. You Italians, I don't know how you guys...
Capodanno.
Capodanno, okay. We're talking, of course, about not only the vocation of being a priest, but we're also talking about the vocation of being in the military, the active military, being on the front lines, being with very young men. I mean, he died in 1967. He was right there in the sweet spot, in the heart of battle. Be with these young men as they were dying.
Yeah.
And then he himself, of course, dying. That takes a special person.
Yeah, it does.
For the most part, those members of the military now they're serving the troops the same way that you serve your troops in your parish.
Correct.
Hey, it's still Lent on an army base the last time I checked, correct? Yeah. But I think that these men have a passion for uniforms. I think they like their clericals, and I think they like their military uniforms. So there must be something with that. In this case, I guess that most of the time if you're in the military, you're in uniform, aren't you?
There's no question, yeah. But when you go into battle, it doesn't matter.
No, it certainly doesn't. No, not at all. Hawaii was so active with military.
Correct.
So active. And you were saying a large Catholic presence there.
Particularly in the military.
Do you have any memories of a Sunday around a military base?
Oh, yes.
And what was it like?
You know, it reminds me of being in a small town, but with big numbers of people. They gathered to get their Sunday best on so that they could come to Mass. The Mass was, how should I put it, you had some people that were there to stay for another year or 2 years or whatever the case might be. Others were going to be deployed and so on. So you had people bringing their own baggage into the Mass, if you want, and praying for those particular intentions. The Mass was geared towards trying to cover everybody, not just, the ones who were leaving, but everybody. Mm-hmm. But as you said earlier, there were times when, and that would be very difficult when people are deployed, but we were living in a time when, this uncertain peace, if you want. It's not exactly peace, but it's not free from it either. So it's a matter of, people... We didn't know what they were going to have to face.
Whenever you're deployed, you never really know what to expect. Anything can happen at any time. It could be an accident. It could be anything that can happen on land can happen on sea. It can happen
friendly fire and all of those things.
Any time that you have aircraft involved, whatever the situation might be. Now, I know for a fact that when you take the number of people that are on an aircraft carrier, I would suspect that there would be at least one representative of all the faiths on board that vessel. And they're going to be out for up to a year. So that's even a greater commitment.
You're right. And the thing is this, that sometimes they can't get one from a particular religion. And so what they do is they try to adjust, like the Catholic priest might have to adjust himself in the way he speaks to the Jewish people, the way he speaks to the Protestants. And so it was a matter of, in the military you have to adjust. There's not always going to be perfect situations.
Yeah.
And so, to answer your question, that happens.
Well, I would think that at certain points, Christianity is Christianity. All right, so you can take a larger number if that's the situation.
Sure.
And you can just talk about Christ.
Yes.
I suspect you can take most of the Gospels and make it apply to virtually any Christian religion.
Yes.
So I think that's the interesting part about it. I have members of my own family that are priests, not my family directly, but cousins.
Yes.
I have one that's up in Kalkaska, and I have another that is in the military in San Diego, and like I told you, is all in, I believe, has reached an extremely high rank. I find it fascinating that, for one, you as a Catholic priest devote your entire life preaching every single day, being there for us. And then you add another component to it, and that being military service to your country.
Yeah, I just want to say something about the military archdiocese because people don't understand it. It stands separate from all the other dioceses. And there's only one military archdiocese for all of the Americans. Because the military is deployed in Europe and, everywhere you can imagine, you have one military archdiocese that covers all of them. Now, when somebody who has entered the seminary to join a particular diocese decides at some point he wants to serve the military besides being a priest, well, there are a couple of ways of handling that. He can ask his bishop to be released from his diocese so that he could go with the military archdiocese. But the other thing, too, somebody who wants to be a priest in the military, even before joining any diocese, can join the military archdiocese directly. It doesn't have to go somewhere else. So there are priests that after they retire from the military can go back to where they originally started. Like take, for example, Boston.
Sure.
They can go back to Boston, and if they're young enough, they can take on, and usually they're encouraged to take on some duties within the Archdiocese of Boston. So that's the way it works. Now, every major country has a military archdiocese, so it's not just the United States, but it's other places as well.
The other aspect of it, by the way, is the fact that being a member of the military provides for some of these priests to have a separate income that is drawn directly from the military. So they'll have a decent pension, just like anybody else that's involved with the military. So it does provide for a nice retirement as well.
Very much so.
So I'm sure that certain people think of it prior to actually going into the military portion of the priesthood. The other thing I was going to ask you about, with the ranks and the amount of priests, or the lack of amount of priests, somebody petitions the archbishop to go and be in the military. Would that be a surprise to you if the archbishop were to say, no, I'd prefer you stay back, we need you here?
No, not a surprise.
No.
It can happen, and it does happen. But ordinarily, if somebody is so intent on going into the military, I think the bishop, usually would want that individual to be happy. And so if that's going to make him happy, well, he'll let him go. He'll release him from the diocese. The other happens all the time also. He says, no, you're needed here, so you're going to stay here.
Yeah, okay. Well, listen, I'd like to salute you. Sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Father Grimaldi. Thanks for pulling this ship in safely, my friend, and I will see you next time on the Father Joe Grimaldi podcast. I'm Ken Calvert, along with Father Joe Grimaldi. We will see you next time.
Look forward to it. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe podcast.
If you'd like, you can email us. It's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. Simply search Father Joe Grimaldi. And thanks for listening, everyone.